Hello, hello, YouTube. Welcome to episode 100 of the Lorethrough, and today we are doing a lore recap, which, in retrospect, I realize was way too big of a bite. My eyes were certainly bigger than my stomach. I thought I had cut down the amount of content I would need to cover a good deal. I was going to focus just on characters. However, upon greater realization, it's a character-driven game for the most part, and that's still a huge amount of content, even when I just focused on named characters, and then removed all the one-note characters. there's still oh so very much, so we may not get through everything today, but I thought we would take a moment this early morning, cuddle up to Muriel Pastor Vows, and elucidate him with what we have learned on our many travels. I figured it would be neat to go through the characters roughly in the order they are introduced to us. Even at the time of them being introduced, we didn't know who they were. So, taking into account the intro cinematic of the game, we will be starting with Queen America, the Eternal. This episode won't have a lot of action going on. I may put in visual references in post, but for the most part, what's on screen may not be all that important. So hopefully this will be your ideal episode for when you're working or just relaxing. Not exactly ASMR by any means, but I hope you still enjoy the content. There's a lot of it to get through. So Queen Marika, the Eternal. Originally the same stock as the Newman, who were descendants of denizens of another world. Despite her seemingly humble roots, she's the god of this world, seemingly subject only to the greater will. She was married to Godfrey, first Elden Lord, and started the golden lineage with him, namely Godwyn. After numerous successful conflicts, she hounded Lord Godfrey from the lands between. She promised he and his men, the Tarnished, that they could come back at some point to brandish the Elden Ring. In the meantime, she married Radagon, the second Elden Lord. This gave Marika 3 new stepchildren, who instantly attained demigodhood by association: Radon, Rykard, and Ranni. Marika and Radagon would go on to have 2 children of their own, the twins Melania and Mikola. Thanks to the Black Knives plot, Godwyn the Golden was the first of the demigods to perish. This drove Queen Marika to the brink. She incited her children to fight, to be lords and gods, or be forsaken, amounting to sacrifices. The Elden Ring shattered. I mean, it looks like Marika and Radagon took turns bashing it with a hammer. But the Elden Ring shattered into bits, and the demigods took up the pieces and warred. It was no contest. Marika disappeared, and Enya revealed that Queen Marika was imprisoned within the Erd Tree. Alright, let's move on to King Consort Radagon. Radagon rose to prominence during the First and Second Liurnian conflicts amongst the heroes and champions of the Erd Tree. He's got red hair and led the armies of Leyndell, where he met Rennala in battle. The result of the First Liurnian War is in question, but apparently Radagon was considered pretty glorious. The Second Liurnian War was a divisive stalemate. Decisive stalemate. Radagon repented of his territorial aggressions by cleansing himself with celestial dew, and swore his love to Rennala. He then married Rennala at the Church of Vows. Somehow, she agreed. Celestial dew sure is powerful. It even made Lunar Princess Ranni forgive our smelly breath and roofie attempt. He is suspected to have received a moonlight greatsword. While part of the Carrion House, he ordered the preceptors to don masks of confidence to make it clear that all their matters were to be kept strictly private. He had 3 children in this marriage, consisting of General Radon, Praetor Reichard, and Lunar Princess Rani. As per the Radigan icon, we know that Radigan, as the husband of Renala, he studied glintstone sorceries. While Godfrey was ultimately hounded from the lands between, Radigan left Renala to return to the Erdtree capital. He went on to marry Queen Marika and become king consort and second Elden Lord. Right as he was skipping out on Renala, however, Radigan gifted his soon-to-be ex-wife an amber egg, for these trying times. And that amber egg contained the great rune of the unborn. Figuratively, Renala's heart went with Radigan when he left. He had 2 children with Marika, Melania and Mikola, as mentioned, and while married to Queen Marika, Radigan studied incantations. He is heavily associated with the Golden Order fundamentalism, a branch of the Golden Order said to be scholarship in all but name, which incorporates incantations that rely on a combination of faith and intelligence. His son, Mikola, followed in his fundamentalist footsteps and created several incantations as gifts for his father. Radigan would return the favor with his own gift of gratitude to the young Mikola, being further incantations. However, Mikola later abandoned fundamentalism, realizing that it could do nothing to treat Melania's rot. We don't know where he is, Radigan that is, other than he was seen swinging a hammer alongside Marika during the opening cinematic. Black Knife Assassins. A group who were responsible for the murder of Godwyn the Golden on the Night of Black Knives, using blades imbued with the power of a fragment of the Rune of Death, in a ritual performed by Rani the Witch. Roger says that they say the assassins who carried out the deed were scions of the Eternal City, a group entirely of women arrayed in armor of silver under cloaks which fooled the eye. Godwyn the Golden. Godwyn the Golden was a demigod and son of Queen Marika the Eternal and Godfrey, first Elden Lord. In the Night of Black Knives plot, he was murdered by the Black Knife assassins, with the use of daggers imbued with the Rune of Death. He was likely one of, if not the first of the Golden lineage. Little is known about his life, save that during the era of the Erdtree, the dragons assaulted Leyndell. It was the only time the walls of Leyndell fell, marking the dawn of the war with the ancient dragons. Godwyn routed the ancient dragons and fought to the last, which earned him the friendship of the dread Fortisax. This even gave rise to the capital's ancient dragon cult. Fortisax's own sister, the dragon Lanciax, took the form of a human to commune with the knights and priestesses of the cult. The cult was perhaps allowed within the Golden Order because the incantations and seals used were imbued with gold. Red-hued lightning incantations seemed to be standard issue, so maybe that was their compromise. However, the Gilded Great Shield and the Ordovis Greatsword tell us that the red-tinged gold is primordial gold, mirroring the primordial matter that became the Erdtree. This could be propaganda developed in post to appease the dragons. While Godwyn was believed to be the first dead among the demigods, he and Rani both died simultaneously. Each was branded with one half of the curse mark of death, that half centipede wheel shape. Rani's flesh perished, while Godwyn perished in soul alone. He was buried at the Erdtree's roots below Leyndell, but being soulless, his body was unable to die a true death. His younger half-brother Mikola wished that Godwyn would die a true death. Fortisax tried to fight against the death within Godwyn, but ultimately, corrupted by the blight, but ultimately was corrupted by the blight, becoming a lich dragon. Now being known as the Prince of Death, Deathroot would spread out from his corpse and spread to all the lands between. Lunar Princess Ranni. Lunar Princess Ranni is an Empyrean with the potential to one day succeed Queen Marika as the divine ruler of the lands between. The Two Fingers granted her the Empyrean status and gave her Blythe to be her shadow and vassal. Rennala approved of Blythe, and he was raised as Ranni's foster brother. Ranni grew up playing with Blythe, and they were often accompanied by Ichi, a troll blacksmith who served the Carrion royals. Thanks to Rennala, young Ranni encountered her dark moon. What she beheld was cold, dark, and veiled in occult mystery. At some point, deep in the woods, Ranni would also meet the Snow Witch, who would become her secret mentor. This old witch was well versed in cold sorceries, and she taught Ranni to fear the dark moon as she imparted her knowledge. Ranni's sigil is the full dark moon. Glintstone dragon Adula was bested by Ranni, who in turn swore a knightly oath to the dark moon. When Ranni's father abandoned Rennala in order to marry that blonde bimbo of no small reputation, Ranni and her siblings were promoted to demigod status by their new stepmother. Although chosen by the Two Fingers as Marika's successor, Ranni did not wish to be a puppet for the greater will. Clearly resenting her Empyrean fate as part of a deliberate plot, Ranni stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malakath, the Black Blade, and through fearsome right imbued it into the black knives of the Eternal City assassins. The next step of the plan was for the assassins to kill another individual, Godwyn, while the Lunar Princess simultaneously killed herself, slaying her own body while the other person, Godwyn, died in spirit. Having a body must have been vital for godhood, as this freed her from being an Empyrean. For anyone paying attention, or at least the least bit of attention, that was the summation of the Night of Black Knives, and the events leading up to it. Rest in peace, Godwyn the Golden. Deciding that some sort of body would be useful, Ranni transferred her spirit to a doll, said to be modeled after the image of her mentor, the Snow Witch. Given that the doll has 4 arms, and revenants found throughout the Liurnia, the lakes, those small 4-armed cretins, some riding horses, others larger with many more hands that are weak to healing incantations, I wonder if the Snow Witch was a revenant. These events made Godwyn and Ranni the first demigod casualties. Ranni's fate and her involvement in the plot seems largely unknown by the denizens of the lands between. When we encounter Ranni, initially we find her at the Church of Ella after speaking with Melina, and she calls herself Renna the Witch, mysteriously, not giving us her true name, and gives us a spirit-calling bell. She recounts that we will likely not speak with her again, and so, for largely the most part, we don't speak to her again till we find her at her estate, where she accepts our service, and we decide to follow up and find out what the Night of Black Knives is all about, where we learn all this information, and we go and we kill General Radahn at her behest so that we might sneak into Necron and retrieve for her the finger-slaying blade, an item that indicates the heresies and blasphemies of the Nox people. Ranni then departs on her own journey, and we follow her. Like a person with no sense of self-control, we find her in the form of a small doll, and after talking to it repeatedly, she eventually gives us most of her backstory relating to her connection to the Two Fingers, as well as her slaying her own flesh as to not be an Empyrean. We slay the baleful shadow, which looks strangely enough like Blythe, and we eventually make our way onto the lunar plateau. In the depths of the Cathedral of Mana Celeste, we find another set of two fingers, marred with the curse mark, beaten, bloodied, and broken. In front of it, we see Ronnie the Witch, in a little bit of a disheveled state, and she's glad it's us who comes and finds her and gives unto her her own lunar princess ring. This sets us apart as a consort to Lady Ronnie, and it unlocks her ending. She even gives us the Moonlight Greatsword. And as far as we know, that is it for Lady Ronnie. Moving forward, Margit the Fell Omen. We find him initially at the gates of Stormvale Castle, where he voices disdain towards us, generally as tarnished. Naturally, he attempts to put an end to our quest. During the fight, he remarks that we have some skill, which shows how comfortable he is on the battlefield. Margit makes use of illusory weapons that are more than illusions, they have substance. And these illusory weapons take the form of the Erdsteel Dagger, the Carrion Knight Sword, and the Giant Crusher Hammer. Even after being defeated, Margit's voice is heard as he disappears. Much later, we found him along the Lanedell outskirts, initially in the guise of a commoner. After defeating Margit handily, this time around, he vanishes, leaving the corpse of the commoner behind. Another bizarre demonstration of his illusory powers. A little farther along the city limits, we find a stone sword monument that reads the following: "The second defense of Lanedell. The fell omen stacks high the corpses of heroes, yet the Erd tree remains unshaken." So it seems that is Margit's ultimate purpose, is to stop heroes from approaching the Erd tree. And given the imagery, it seems that he has done a good job of that. Let me take a sip of my drink. I think we're making good progress so far. The script I wrote was absolutely massive. It was like 40 pages, 19,000 words. And my goodness, is that a lot of writing. I haven't done that much writing in a good while, so it's probably good for me. Conqueror of the Stars, Star Scourge, General Radahn, the man, the myth, the legend. He is the mightiest hero of the demigods. Source, it is known. As well as the Star Scourge heirloom. Star Scourge Radahn was one of the strongest participants in the Shattering. Radahn is the son of Champion Radagon and Carrion Queen Renala. He has two siblings, Rykard and Ronnie. Radahn inherited his father's flaming red hair and was fond of its heroic implications. From a young age, he was enamored with the Elden Lord Godfrey. Attempting to emulate his idol, Radahn adorned his armor with lions, the symbol of Godfrey. We also know that Radahn eventually outgrew his scrawny but beloved steed, Leonard. To avoid abandoning his horse, Radahn studied gravitational magic in Celia under an Alabaster Lord. With his newfound mastery of gravitational magic, Radahn was able to challenge the very stars themselves. Radahn conquered the stars, saving Celia in the process, using his vast gravitational powers to shatter the stars and arrest their cycles, earning him the moniker of Star Scourge. During this time, he engraved the gravity crest upon his blades. Radahn's soldiers were known as the Redmanes, for the red-maned lion raising a sword in the image of Radahn on their surcoats. The longest surviving of the Redmane Knights was Ogha, who studied gravitational techniques alongside Radahn in Celia. It was known and often said that the Redmanes knew no weakness. Though we don't know when, precisely, Jaren, the witch hunter, became a guest of the Carrion Royals, and subsequently a guest commander for Radahn's armies, and they swore a mutual oath of honorable death to each other. Radahn's stronghold is the aptly named Redmane Castle, though it seems obvious that he repurposed it, and it was actually built by the Sainted Tree Stratum. By the end of the Shattering, only Radahn and his half-sister Malenia, Blade of Mikola, were the mightiest left standing. The two fought to a stalemate in the Battle of Aeonia, which ended when Malenia unleashed her Scarlet Rot. The Scarlet Rot ravaged Caelid and consumed Radahn from the inside, eating away at his mind and body. Following the Battle of Aeonia, Radahn roams the Wailing Dunes as a mindless beast who devours the flesh of friend and foe alike, howling at the sky. Without their commander, the Redmane Knights burned the crest on their left breast of their armor to indicate their resolve to not return home, and to serve as a bulwark against the spread of rot in Caelid using fire. Despite his madness, Radahn continued to ride his scrawny steed and hold the motion of the stars. The Radahn festival was organized by his men in Castle Redmane, as well as Jaren, to celebrate his last battle and death. It gathered a smattering of warriors who might finally put the general down while also claiming his great rune. The festival serves as Jaren's way of fulfilling his oath of honorable death to Radahn. Naturally, the festival is a success, and Radahn is freed from his tortured existence by yours truly. The stars resume their cycles instantly, and one of which comes crashing down upon the lands between, specifically Limgrave, boring a relatively neat path to Necron, Eternal City, and allowing the fate of Radahn's sister Ranni to progress. Mohg the Omen, or Mohg the Omen. Mohg is a named omen like Margit that we know very little about. We know less about Mohg than we know about Margit. We found his shackle, which was designed to keep him specifically under the strictest confinement, in the sewers beneath Lanedale. From the Lord of Blood's exaltation, we learn that Mohg is considered a Lord of Blood, and he wants his subjects to offer up offerings of blood to drench his consort's chamber, also to slake the consort's cocoon's thirst. So his consort has a cocoon and it's thirsty. This is meant to herald the dawn of some dynasty. During Vare the White Mask's questline, we promised to serve Luminary Mohg, Lord of Blood, as a knight, to establish this new dynasty. Mohg is described as having strength, vision, and of course, love. From the Pure Blood Knight's medal, we are told that Mohg yet slumbers beside the divinity. Unfortunately, it's a bunch of incomplete details for us. Hopefully we will find out more later in the playthrough. Mikola. Mikola is one of the two youngest demigods, being the children of Queen Marika and Radagon. We know Mikola was an Empyrean alongside his twin Malenia and his half-sister Ranni. One of the earliest items we get that mentions Mikola, the Bewitching Branch, informs us that the Empyrean Mikola is loved by many people. Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection. A Mikola lily is required to make such a branch, and the flower is a signifier of the Halleck tree, which we know so very little about. Mikola was a Golden Order fundamentalist who pioneered and gifted incantations to his father, Radagon. Radagon even gifted the Radagon's Ring of Light incantation back to his son as a show of gratitude. Yet the young Mikola abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Malenia's accursed rot. We are told this was the beginning of unalloyed gold. Speaking of unalloyed gold, Gowry, the sage, the heretical sage, has us find a needle of such purity for him to repair. It's a ritual implement crafted to ward away the meddling of outer gods, and is shown to be capable of forestalling the incurable rotting sickness. Perhaps Mikola made that very needle, or maybe he simply pioneered the technology and practice. Lastly, from the Golden Epitaph Straight Sword, we learn that Mikola mourned the loss of his older stepbrother Godwyn. In prayer, Mikola said, "O brother, Lord brother, please die a true death." Perhaps this also aided in Mikola's rejection of fundamentalism, as it was unable to stop those who live in death, as well as the Scarlet Rot. Justiciar Rykard. the forgotten alleged middle child of the Carian progeny. Gideon tells us that he is the lord of the volcano manor on Mount Gelmir. He's also a ruthless justiciar who commands a company of inquisitors, reviled for his serpentine demeanor, which is a fairly ironic phrasing, I might add. As inquisitors do, they persecuted and mercilessly tortured those considered heretics to the Golden Order, including Albinaurics. During his tenure at Mount Gelmir, Riker discovered the ancient dragon. The ancient dragon just seems to follow the word ancient in my mind a lot of the time, so I apologize. Riker discovered the ancient magma hexes of a forgotten serpent-worshipping religion native to the region, which he brought back into practical use as new sorceries. Riker seems to be the inventor of the Iron Virgins, the Abductor Virgins, autonomous war machines which were capable of abducting victims to transport them to the Volcano Manor. When the Shattering War came, Riker was indignant and viewed the Erd Tree and Queen Marika demanding that the demigods fight over miserly scraps of power to be debasing. Naturally, he launched a blasphemous campaign against the Erd Tree and the Greater Will. Riker's ambitions, though blasphemous, marked him a worthy sovereign and drew many followers to his cause who admired his heroic aspirations. His lackeys were known as recusants. The Volcano Manor's forces on Mount Gelmir would battle the armies of Leyndell in what would be the most appalling battle of the Shattering. A wretched, unending war with no glory, which led to many of the participants succumbing to cannibalism and the frenzied flame disease. At some point during the Shattering, for seemingly no reason at all, Riker fed himself, great rune at all, to the Blasphemous Serpent. Blasphemous Serpent being a known ancient traitor to the Erd Tree, his knights watched as his lofty ambitions degraded into gluttonous depravity. They weren't fans. Understandably disturbed by what had become of their master and by the costly battles waged in his name, all of Riker's men abandoned his cause. Hopefully, they got some warranted therapy as well. Some of his men attempted to put him to rest, searching for a weapon to kill their lord. The Serpent Hunter, an enchanted spear crafted to hunt an immortal serpent in the distant past. However, they failed to kill him. Given the low requirements of the weapon, it must have been a vigor check. One of Riker's men left the spear in his chambers, hoping to find a worthy champion that might wield it and kill Riker, sparing his once noble master from further dishonor. I'm not passing moral judgment here, but if your boys get together because you're acting cringeworthy, that might be a sign to stop being blasphemous. There were other fallouts when Riker gave himself to the Elder Serpent. One, for instance, was the birth of the man-serpents, unfortunate and deformed offspring of a repellent birthing ritual. One such man-serpent, known as Zarias, would go on to be adopted by Tanith, proprietress of the Volcano Manor. Raya, or Zarias, would learn to assume an illusory human form in which she went by the name Raya. She was unaware of the origins of her birth, as Tanith concealed the truth of Volcano Manor from her and insisted she was born of the grace of a king. At some point before giving himself to the serpent, Riker offered Tanith the tonic of forgetfulness to purge her memories of him. However, she refused, claiming, "My lord, there could be no greater distress than to forget you." We seem to know where the Great Serpent is, but we stole the legendary spear and moved on because we need to kill Juno Hoslow first. Oops. Blasphemous Serpent. I was going to talk about the Blasphemous Serpent, but I think we've essentially covered it with Riker. There are a handful more weapons that continue about how the serpent is a blasphemous and hated symbol, but maybe we'll learn more later about the Blasphemous Serpent, possibly after that boss fight. Melania the Severed, Blade of Mikola. Let's take a drink for this one, and then I think we'll cut the episode after. You're probably wondering, that's not nearly all of the characters correct, but I've done such big episodes lately, I figured I should cut them into 30-minute bites just to save you and myself from more torture. Melania the Severed, Blade of Mikola. Melania the Severed was born with her twin Mikola to God Queen Marika and her second husband, Elden Lord Radagon. Third set of the demigods were these twins. Both Melania and Mikola were Empyreans, meaning they had the potential to one day replace their mother as a new god of the coming age. We don't know how, but Melania was afflicted with scarlet rot. Whether she was born with it or came into contact with it later, we don't know. Yet. Conveniently, Melania encountered a blind swordsman who had sealed away an outer god of rot. The swordsman became her master and trained her in the ways of battle, allowing her to gain wings of unparalleled strength. Melania would eventually become a peerless warrior. She would attract loyal servants like her clean rot knights, who vowed to fight next to her despite the inevitable and gradual putrefaction of their flesh. This adoration would bring worshippers who believed her to be a goddess, notably Male of House Marias, who was born sickly and was naturally drawn to the beautiful and fierce Melania, who had become such a powerful warrior in spite of being born into rot, and requiring a prosthesis to fight. I guess we don't know if she was born to rot. That was a mistype on my end. So, despite being a powerful warrior in spite of being afflicted with rot and requiring a prosthesis to fight, I should say, Melania and Mikola seemed to be close. Melania became her brother's sworn blade and protector, while Mikola worked tirelessly to try to undo his sister's curse. While unable to find a cure for his sister, Mikola discovered unalloyed gold, a material used in needles that could ward off the influence of outer gods and stay the spread of scarlet rot. During the Shattering, Melania led an army that marched southward. She won many battles and even humbled a fellow demigod and shard-bearer, Godric the Grafted, who groveled at her feet for mercy after first insulting her and then suffering defeat. This put Melania's goals into question, because defeating Godric could have easily scored a great rune for herself and Mikola's cause. That didn't seem to be her priority. Melania and her half-brother Radahn would eventually be the last two demigods left standing in the conflict, fighting a bitter duel for supremacy in the Caelid Wilds. In fear of losing an honorable fight with Radahn, the Scarlet Rot was unleashed by Melania. The blooming of the Scarlet Rot devastated Caelid, leaving it a rotting wasteland, and caused Radahn to rapidly degenerate, losing his wits and cursing him to wander the battlefield as a mindless beast, feasting on the bodies of friend and foe alike. Melania really is a sore loser. Jokes aside, it makes one wonder what Melania's purpose is in confronting Radahn in his own territory. After all, she spared Godric. Perhaps her goal was that other than power? Perhaps she hoped to persuade Radahn to release the stars. We don't know. But if Radahn knew about the overly eager natural-born horrors of the void, he may have been right to arrest their movements. As an aside, Millicent and her unspecified number of sisters are implied to be descendants from Melania in some way, but they're more of offshoots or buds of her scarlet bloom rather than actual daughters. The kindred of Rot also seems to gestate in Melania's wake, and they worship her fervently. Alright, that's going to be it for today. We will resume for more lore. It looks like, according to my scroll wheel, we may have gotten through a fourth of it, or just under a fourth of my total scripts. Hopefully this doesn't take 4 episodes, but we'll find out. I think we will speed up, especially as we get to the smaller characters, while the first few will be considerably larger. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a good one. Come back next time for episode 101 when we continue this lore recap. Bye-bye now.